Let's maybe mute microphones.
Yeah, so go ahead and mute everybody, and I'm going to say thank you so much for coming out. Welcome to What Do We Do With Our Kids? It's a community talk on childcare and education this year in Albemarle County. This event is organized and hosted by Albemarle Democrats Rio District, but it is open to everybody. We'll post this via the YouTube after the event's over. I'm the co-chair of the Rio District, Nathan Moore, and also on the call is my co-chair, Daisy Stevens-Rojas. And before we get started, just a little housekeeping. This is the first of several monthly talks that we're hosting on the third Wednesday of each month. Next month, on September 16th at 7 p.m., our discussion will be about Black Lives Matter in Albemarle County. Then on Wednesday, October 21st, also at 7 p.m., 5th District U.S. Congressional candidate Dr. Cameron Webb will be joining us to talk about racial disparities in healthcare and the need to get out the vote. This year, what with the pandemic going on, we're also highly encouraging early voting. Please, you can request an absentee ballot today. Early in-person voting at the county registrar's office begins on September 18th. All the details about all that are at elections.virginia.gov. So yeah, this is a pretty full Zoom call. If you're not actually speaking or about to speak, please mute yourself during the discussion. I hear a click of some sort from somebody. If you have any questions or comments, just type those into the chat window. Daisy's going to monitor those throughout the hour, and we'll bring them up to our guests. I am really pleased to have just an all-star panel of guests for our event tonight. I want to introduce Katrina Callsen. She's Albemarle County School Board member representing the Rio District. Hi, Katrina. Also, Marian McCullough, teacher at Mountain View Elementary School. Hi, Marian. Barbara Hutchinson, Vice President of Community Impact at United Way, Mia Woods, the COO of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Virginia, and Brittany Lichter, a former teacher, and I've made up the title ad-hoc homeschool specialist. Most of us on this call are parents, if not all of us. I want to start with some conversation for the parents of the younger kids, the under 5 set. Let's start with probably Barbara, and then we can kind of go from there. How has childcare changed for children under 5?
Very dramatically. So childcare is licensed by the Department of Social Services in our state. They have responded quickly during COVID to instate safety regulations in order for childcare providers to stay open. And in our community, we had about 14 that remained open throughout, but many, many more closed. Some still haven't reopened. The regulations are still in place. Those that have children have done so very safely. There have been no cases of COVID in any of the child care centers that have been open, nor to my knowledge in the family day homes that are open. The biggest change is that the capacity has been reduced. So, for example, a classroom that would serve 3- and 4-year-old preschool students used to have a capacity of 18 to 20, and now has a capacity of 10 bodies. So that would be 8 preschoolers, 1 teacher, and 1 assistant. So it is very difficult for the providers because their revenues have been decimated and they have additional expenses. So they have significant sanitizing that has to go on throughout the day. Children have to remain in a classroom for lunch. Only 1 class can be on a playground at a time. And then some of them have reduced hours in order to allow for thorough sanitizing in the evening after the center closes. So for the parents that are now returning to work, it's very difficult because the capacity has been reduced so dramatically. And then we have parents of school-age children trying to get school-age children in the centers as well for before and after school. And so it's become very competitive and just a very difficult environment right now, particularly for our economically disadvantaged families, because as you know, many of them are already, they're hourly wage workers, they're oftentimes frontline essential personnel. That could be the custodian at UVA hospital, or a certified nursing assistant, or a grocery store clerk. And so we know that they are far more exposed to COVID, and more their infection rate is higher. And we also know from an equity perspective that our minority frontline workers are more likely to be impacted by COVID than others. So as a population, our economically disadvantaged families and the child care centers that keep the preponderance of our vulnerable children are struggling.
This is a question for you, Barbara, or maybe anybody, really. Do we have any idea how, if or how many available centers are actually accepting enrollments right now?
We have at least 20 centers to 25 that are accepting enrollments, although a good portion of them are filling up. For example, we work with the public school system to offer what's called mixed delivery. We place 3- and 4-year-olds that are eligible for public pre-K, but we place them with a high-quality provider because they have a barrier to participating in the public pre-K, the reduced day example, and now it being virtual, at least for the first 4 to 6 weeks. So we're having difficulty finding spots for the kids, whereas last year there was plenty of capacity at this time as we were approaching the school year. This year, where one center last year told us we could have 25 slots, this year they told us we could have 3. So family day homes are a little different. Those are providers who keep children in their home, but we have the same case there. By and large, family day home providers are disproportionately minorities, and again, working for $9 and $10, and well, not even $9 or $10 an hour. Our family day home providers are regulated, and the state caps their daily rate at $30 per child for the day, whereas a child care center might be able to charge, depending on age, up to $55 a day per child. So there are many more of those that are open, but they're very limited in terms of the number of children they can keep. They're more likely to be used by a parent seeking infant and toddler care. So we have a new center on 29 North that's high quality. A teacher left Westminster and started this new center, so we've been working with her. And again, initially she thought she would have quite a few slots to offer us, and she's now down under 10. So, I mean, we're not counting in hundreds of slots. We're counting, in less than 100 slots, if we can find 100 slots. We work very closely with Network to Work, which is a large workforce program in our community that's highly successful. They are having difficulty finding students for their program because the parents can't find care. And that's, again, not only the 0 to 5, but the before and after school, and during the summer care for school-age children. So the impact on our community is far more than what the average citizen would probably realize, particularly those that are middle class and up, because they don't face the same issues that our lower income families and the providers that keep our lower income families face.
Barbara, could you repeat the name of that new center? We had a comment in the Q&A.
Playful Learners, and it's near the Dunkin' Donuts. It's a brand new center. The teacher used to work at Westminster, which is a very high quality center, and started Playful Learners during this past year. Has received all of her licensing, and we're working with her through our Early Learner Scholarship Program to place some children there.
Barbara, I want to bring in some of our other guests as well, and put you on mute for just a little bit. But for any of our other speakers here, whether that's Mia or Marian or Katrina or Brittany, what are you hearing about how families have been impacted by this so far? What are families doing? Oh.
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. So the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Virginia, we have 6 clubs in this area, 3 in Charlottesville, Albemarle, so 1 at our Cherry Avenue location, which is obviously Charlottesville, but then 2 in Albemarle, which is the Jack Jewett Club, which is a site-based club at Jack Jewett Middle School, and our Southwood Club in the Southwood community. And so we made the decision to physically close our doors on March 13th, which is the same date as schools. And then as we prepared for summer, we also made the decision not to physically reopen for summer. We did a lot of virtual programming, and in summer we were able to step it up quite a bit and include home deliveries. And so those allowed us to interact with families a bit more, and we did quite a few parent surveys as well. We didn't get a clear understanding on kind of for our Jewett population, so that would be Greer and Jewett students, what families were doing, but the outcry was that childcare is the top priority at this time, and that they're concerned for their kids. We did one survey which was like, what are your top concerns at this time? And it was childcare and concern that my child is falling behind academically. So we didn't really get feedback on what else people would do, but in some of the narrative comment sections, there was a lot of, narrative expression of, I'm a single mom and I have to work. The club is the only way that I can like sustain a job with the amount of hours that I need. And then particularly in our Southwood community, we did notice a lot of, peer-to-peer and friend-to-friend, child care assistance. So that's kind of counterintuitive to quarantining and isolation, but people just kind of doing what they can and having older kids watch siblings. And this is information that we were able to gather because we were doing virtual programming. So it would be the situation where we're running a live virtual session and a screen would pop up with 5 or 6 kids in the one screen. And we know that it represents 2 or 3 different households. And while we loved seeing those smiles, during quarantine, that's not the greatest solution, but I think families are kind of without solutions at this time. We are planning to reopen 5 of our 6 facilities, and the one that we are not physically reopening is the Southwood facility for health concerns. And so we are planning to reopen those facilities, and we have way more people than we can serve. So we invited those who were members last year to complete pre-registration forms. And so for the first time ever, we have to prioritize enrollment. And at our Jack Jewett Club, I think we have 155 children who have completed the pre-registration form. We'll be able to serve 40 of those. So our club will be open a full day to create a safe space to encourage their virtual learning that they're supposed to be doing from home, and then do some of the traditional Boys and Girls Club things after school. But we are at an extreme deficit for how many kids we can serve. And then of those 40 that we'd be able to serve because of space limitations, we're also currently really facing limitations with staffing. So we furloughed about 85% of our workforce. All of our frontline part-time staff have been furloughed since the top of June. We've tried to remain in good touch with them. We do a state of the club every other week. We've expressed that when we reopen, the only way to do it is with them. But it's just been really difficult. People have either moved out of the area or found different employment, or they're hesitant and nervous about returning. So that's also going to be a limiting factor for us. And I know that some other youth development organizations like the Y in our area are also experiencing that issue with staffing in order to meet even our new limited capacity.
I had a question in the comments. Do you have a date to open, and in what capacity compared with normal enrollment?
Yes. So right now for this Albemarle group, well, actually, and I failed to mention that we have our James River Club, which is in Scottsville. So it's still slipped in the southern tip of Albemarle. So we also run our James River Club in Scottsville. So sorry. But our James River Club and our Jewett Club will physically reopen on September 14th. Families are finding out about whether or not we can invite them to membership this week. Our James River Club, I probably can't speak about it because I don't have it memorized, But our Jack Jewett Club will be able to serve 40 youth, and our James River Club will be able to serve about 46 over the course of a week. Whereas before, both of those were serving 120 kids each day during normal times. But yes, we plan to open 1 week after school starts. And again, as it affects Albemarle, we will not be opening in our Southwood Club. And that club generally sees about 140 kids a day during normal times.
I want to come back and at some point soon just to kind of figure out some answers to the question behind this whole thing. What the heck do we do with our kids when all the centers are at reduced capacity? But I want to move on right now to talk more about education for elementary school grades and bring in some of our other guests here. Marian or Katrina, why don't you all tell us to start off with what's virtual education going to look like for younger school age kids, the K through 2, K through 3?
Oh, Katrina looks like she's about to speak. Go ahead.
You can go first. I'm happy to listen.
Sure. I think that is the question that most public school educators are wrestling with currently. As a public school educator, I think there is this understanding that virtual is the most safe in terms of knowing that we have marginalized people groups that are highly and heavily and disproportionately impacted by being in spaces where the contagion of COVID is inevitable. Just looking at states like Georgia and Florida. I think that virtual schooling is supposed to look like a shorter time period of students being on synchronous learning, and then it will be about half the time being asynchronous. I think the challenge that we're running into right now, especially as instructors, is teachers want to, I as a public school educator would love to be able to offer my individualized services to students throughout the day. And so similarly to centers and Boys and Girls Club, we're running into this issue of, with virtual, there are so many things that we're able to offer, but the capacity in which we're able to offer them will likely not be as individualized as it could be in the beginning of the year, because some students won't have access to internet lessons for a while. I ran into this problem for a pretty decent amount of time last year, where some of my students didn't have access to the internet, to the lessons I was providing, and received paper. We've been working really closely to come up with a solution that is as rigorous as what we have, but I would say that is the biggest challenge that's been presenting itself right now, is how do we offer instruction that's as rigorous if students still seem to have internet issues, connectivity issues, if there's barriers to access, especially with students who speak English as a second language. And I think that generally we're putting all hands on deck, but each school is really coming together to form the idea of how do we, as a division, have a pacing guide that allows us to meet the needs of students, to come together and say, if we're all instructing students in this way, they will be able to achieve and succeed. I think it's going to be a process in which virtual learning will probably be something similar to what the first 6 weeks of school looks like in person, where we're building those relationships in order to be able to individualize and in order to be able to meet the needs of families. And right now, at least where I work, we're really asking for families to give feedback and input and to say, these are the barriers we foresee happening, because some of them, I think we just won't know, and we need partnership more than ever now with families specifically.
Katrina, go ahead.
Yep, I can chime in on that as well. So I'll say that what a day is actually going to look like has been on the forefront of my mind. I have a first grader and a kindergartner. I asked as part of pre-agenda to have that be our next board meeting. So on August 27th, they are going to be walking us through the schedule of what to expect if you have a student who's in the Albemarle County Public Schools. I'm happy to share that information. It's actually already been shared with parents, and I can maybe email it to Nathan to pass out, but I can tell you in very broad strokes for K to 5, which I think is what you asked about, Nathan, it's going to be an A-B schedule so that parents have the option of choosing to participate in the morning or the afternoon, depending on their schedule for the synchronous learning, with the asynchronous learning happening during the other portion. there are gonna be parts that are obviously optional, like there's depending on what you want for your child. And I just got a question today from a parent asking if you can have part-time participation. I know many parents, Brittany can probably speak to this, are arranging homeschooling pods, things that they're doing. And so there is going to be the ability to participate part-time. You don't have to do the whole thing. And I'm anticipating asking and having answers to a lot more of these questions at our next meeting. And I would strongly encourage parents, and Brittany, perhaps this is something you can put on the Facebook group that you started that I know has a big membership. If you could share those questions and concerns ahead of the meeting. I push them to release information to parents ahead of time so that we can get input before we get to the meeting and start talking through the schedule. And real quick, to speak to Marian's point about the connectivity, that is something that was a concern for many of the board members. And it's one of the reasons I voted for, at the very least, stage 2, because although we're doing a very rigorous push to provide internet connectivity for all of our students, there are places in Albemarle. I don't know if any, you know, it's like you can drive way out in the boonies and then you're like, wow, I'm still in Albemarle somehow. Like, I didn't realize how big this place is. There are places that just cannot get internet. So even though we're paying for internet for those who can't afford it, we're providing hotspots to those that can use a hotspot if there's a cell coverage. There's still concerns, even with the hotspots, if you have multiple students, there's not enough bandwidth to get video learning. And so it's the goal that those students would be able to come into school and with a learning coach access the curriculum virtually at a school, a physical location.
Katrina, while I've got you, you mentioned the K-5 sort of bell schedule, as it were, will be either A or B, so either morning or afternoon for the synchronous learning. What's that virtual bell schedule going to look like for middle and high school?
Okay, so, and this is like hot off the press. And Nathan, like I said, I'm happy to take screenshots and share with you because I was assured that it's coming out very soon. So for middle school and high school, I think the goal is to have a more traditional, and this, Brittany, you can chime in, I feel like someone shared the high school, middle school one on that group.
Yeah, just today.
Yeah. It's
I'm trying to look up the group actually, like specifically what it's called, because yeah. Yeah, someone did just for middle and high school, not for elementary yet.
And it's supposed to look more like a traditional schedule where you're going to have an 85-minute course, 4 courses with breaks in between, with some guidelines around how much of that portion of that 85 minutes has to be synchronous. It's not that you have to be logged on with your video on for the full 85 minutes. It might be 15 minutes of direct instruction followed by the remainder of your time to work on your independent projects with teacher check-ins if you need them.
And to answer the question, yes, I'm putting the link in there to the direct link to that Albemarle Virtual Public School Kids group. So that's in the chat. Brittany, Katrina kind of threw it to you a couple times here. What are, tell me more about homeschooling pods. What are some possibilities that you're seeing float out there that seem like they might be tenable?
Well, I think what I saw and what I noticed was that people were starting to talk about pods, and either that being forming a small group with a couple of other families of similar aged kids and taking turns among households about who, pairing or just taking turns of who's responsible for the kids learning that day, and also forming small groups and hiring a private tutor or teacher. And immediately there was the concern about, how equitable it was. And it really, I think, puts parents in a really difficult position because I understand the desire to hire someone. If you're working full time, you don't have that time. But I feel like the conversation was kind of shut down after that, whether it's people really aren't trying to do pods any longer, or if it's they're just not sharing it on the Facebook group since it's not equitable. But no, at this point, I'm trying to help parents prepare individually versus in a pod. But I don't know. Yeah, people will do what they need to do.
Yeah. What are some of the individual preparations that you're trying to help with parents right now?
I think it helps to know where parents, where teachers are coming from, and to know, to kind of have that open communication and sharing of resources. the things that I think are helpful is to, very basic, like setting up a designated study space, a place that can be in your virtual homeschool center, whether it be a place at the dining table or, a makeshift desk or something. It's helpful to have a space that when a child is sitting there, they know it's school time. Also, obviously, trying to minimize distractions is helpful. I've seen those cardboard science fair display boards suggested as a way of eliminating distractions, and that's a good idea, especially if you have several kids in a small space. I've seen people mentioning making sure that it's a comfortable location, that kids aren't forced to look down at a screen like this and be able to sustain themselves, for long periods of time. One thing I know that's very helpful is both a parent and a former teacher is establishing a daily schedule and really sticking to it. And I say this because it's very difficult for me. And that way you can refer back to the schedule and say, this is math time, this is whatever it is that you're doing with the asynchronous part. And then finally, like establishing expectations with your kids together, rules really, but rather than stating them outright, just trying to say, okay, we know at this time we'll be working on school. I think that's helpful. But as far as like what the teachers are doing, I think it's helpful for parents to understand like the process that teachers use in trying to decide what they're going to teach each year. And that starts really broadly with the scope of what is being taught, and the SOLs play into this as far as just determining what that is going to be for each year. So that's helpful. The pacing is helpful to know. The pacing guide is something that teachers create at the beginning of a school year, and as a parent would be very helpful to know kind of what you're leading into so that you can maybe more adequately prepare your kid. And then also just really clearly define learning goals. It's helpful to be able to state to both your child and to just understand where you're going again, and trying to make sure that any kind of activity, there's so many fun activities and resources online, but if they don't support those learning goals, it's just filler basically. It's like busy work. So I think trying to stick with those learning goals is really important. But I'm just going on and on. So
all right, thanks, Brittany.
Yeah.
I want to kind of talk a little bit more, or ask a little bit more about, you've got a lot of parents that are going to have a tough time. I mean, in theory, the virtual bell schedule and the synchronous learning and the kids can work sort of independently during asynchronous, maybe that'll work to keep kids engaged, but a lot of folks have to work and can't be sort of like on call tech support all day long. What are some safe options for parents to do? And any of y'all can jump in on this one. I'll open the floor.
I think the silence speaks volumes.
Right. I think one of the comments earlier was that there's just no good solution.
No.
Yeah, Nathan, I think that's been one of the hardest parts of this. And I doubt that y'all listen to these long, kind of arduous school board meetings, but there's no good solution. I have to constantly remind myself to be optimistic, which I am optimistic. Kids are resilient. We're going to get through this. Community partners are reaching out all the time. People are trying to make it work, but there is no great solution. So what I'm seeing as a school board member and as a mother, I can speak to what I'm doing as a mother, is I found a group of friends that I do a childcare swap on. And when school starts, it's going to be interesting, which is one reason I'm going to push and continue to push for there to be maximum flexibility for students to do the work when it works for them, because I might be able to do it on a Saturday and a Sunday and not when I'm working my job. So I guess as a school board member, that's what I'm pushing for, is just extreme flexibility so that parents can continue whatever childcare solution they've managed to work out, because we're 6 months in, and still then somehow fold in the educational piece as we move forward. Doesn't hit everyone because there's people that are still struggling with childcare. But that's what I'm thinking of as a school board member.
And I really agree with what Katrina said. There is no one right answer. And as much as I wish that we could have been entirely virtual, I also understand because inequity exists in every pocket and we have to address it. And I think that the best thing you can do, at least that I've seen parents and families starting to do, is build that community with other families. I have spoken with some families who I think are more afraid than others that their child is going to fall behind in this virtual time. And so I think this is an opportunity now more than ever to, if you can't band together with other community members within your school building, at least to check in and to see how you can offer that help and support. I think often in these times, the statement that Brittany made earlier, it is Brittany, right? Names are important to me. Okay. Yeah. About how people have been upset about these pods. Part of that does come from the divide that comes, right? The opportunity gap already exists. And so I think the one thing that I feel really passionately about as someone who knows that that opportunity gap can continue to persist is checking in and connecting with others who may be in other circumstances, not out of pity or out of the feeling that they have less, but really out of that feeling that the connection of, hey, how's your child doing at meeting this learning goal? We've been doing this, because I think there's so many families that are looking for solutions and connection and for community, and looking for answers. And I don't think we're going to get to answers with simply an A/B asynchronous synchronous schedule. I think the part of opportunity that comes out of virtual learning is that opportunity for families across cultures to band together and to say, these are the things that we believe are important to learn, and this is how we've been achieving, especially now that we can't do that in person.
Yeah, that was something that yeah, I definitely, besides being flexible and both with your and giving yourself grace in terms of doing the best you can. Everyone's doing the very best they can, and yeah, it's not going to be the same as being in a classroom, but I think recognizing that everyone's just doing their best. But also, yeah, to reach out to, reach out to certainly to the teacher, and like you were saying, and to do it now. They just went back to work, yesterday? Reach out now and say if there's a concern or a barrier that you have, and teachers are very accommodating, and they will certainly do what they can. If it's a technology issue, they're supposed to be positions available for kids who don't have that access if the hotspots don't work or if there are too many kids. So certainly contact your administrators as well. If that's an issue, I'm sure that there are solutions out there. You just have to ask. But also feel that, yeah, you can reach out to other parents, because I myself, having been a former teacher, I am very excited about sharing the resources I found. And yeah, all you have to do is ask, I think.
Mia, I noticed you're unmuted. Did you want to jump in?
I think I'm just unmuted from before, but I'm really just echoing everything that, Katrina and Marian have said, which is, the extension of grace to those who are still providers during this time and have a limited space, to teachers who are figuring it out along the way. And I think that we have conditioned ourselves to have a high degree of anxiety around the start of school, and it's day one, you got to be ready to go. We're not ready to go. Nobody's ready to go. And I just think that we all have to realize that as a community, and continue to share resources and things that you hear, and also continue to be good consumers of those resources. So unfortunately, in the club setting, we're having to do something that we really have never done before, which is prioritize membership. We have had wait lists before, but prioritizing wait lists means that if we have a first grader, if we have one spot and we have a first grader or we have a fifth grader, we're going to prioritize the youngest potentially unsupervised child, because that's how we have to think right now. It's not on a first come, first served basis. We do not right now want children in the club who do have a grandparent at home that could supervise them during the day. So I have developed new terms for myself as I'm prioritizing these forms called adult delta, the difference between the number of adults who live in your home and the number of adults who live in your home and work outside of the home during school hours. That's not something that we've concerned ourselves with before, but just realizing that everybody is stretching their limits, hopefully to try to do what's best for our kids and keep them safe, because lack of supervision is one that comes about with what we are embarking upon. And it's, a community effort.
Got a question from a parent. Are you all concerned at all about the amount of screen time in this format, especially for the younger learners? Marian, you made some moves over there. Why don't you start?
I laughed because I mean, I think that screen time will forever be a concern in this pandemic. And I think that the only thing I can say that I feel really strongly about is that within that schedule, I agree with Katrina in that it's personalizing it and making it what you feel is best. I worked with families last year who were really adamant that screen time was the worst thing ever, and they didn't want that to happen. And I think that if that is your feeling for your child, and if that is your concern, then you are more than welcome to create opportunities for them to do things outside or to advocate for them. I think that I am concerned about screen time in the sense that I don't want younger kids exposed to that for as long a time as it will probably be, but I also think this is an opportunity to provide that quality feedback that teachers so need. And I will probably always be on my soapbox about this, but that's because I've had so many parents give feedback and help me to prioritize their child's learning and their child's learning in a way that was beneficial to that child. And so with that, I would say, even when you see a schedule like that, that says synchronous, asynchronous, the thing that I, as a teacher, always want to advocate is that you can advocate for what's best for your child. And that the teachers that I've met will always, always work to facilitate that with you and to co-facilitate that in the same way that Brittany works to individualize with parents and families how they're going to work with their kids. Right now, more than ever, is an opportunity for teachers to do that with you and to figure out how to make that screen time that they're providing accessible to your child while simultaneously also making it possible for your child to do work outside of that. Because I do think that that's crucial and important.
All right. Got some other questions. Jennifer Graham, why don't you go ahead and unmute? She's got a question about the schedule, and it seemed like there was too much type.
Yes. So I'm Jennifer Graham, and I actually am a teacher and a parent in Albemarle County. So I have a rising first grader at Stone Robinson, and I teach at Walton Middle School. And I just first want to say I appreciate you guys doing this. I wish that the southern end of the county had something similar, and I appreciate you guys welcoming other voices in too. So I know because I'm part of this community, a lot of people have been voicing a lot of concerns. A lot of parents have been voicing concerns about the schedule that was just released to parents and just the length of the day. And so I feel like there's, maybe some confusion around some things. And I know Brittany very wonderfully said, like, reach out to teachers, but they don't know who their teachers are yet. And so I think that in a time where people are already feeling kind of stressed and panicked and there's all this stuff going on, it's like, how can we better communicate what that actual day is going to look like to parents? Because they have the schedule now, and I don't want more kids to kind of be pulled for homeschooling or other things than need to be because parents are envisioning one thing when the reality might be something different. But I'm a teacher and I'm in the meetings, and I think I kind of understand what the goal is, and I still am even a little bit like, this is my interpretation of it. And so I also don't want to misspeak or, calm friends down that I feel like, well, maybe that's not the right interpretation for the county's vision.
Yeah, I agree. The communication thing has really been a struggle. I mean, it comes down to people just, have you heard this? I heard this. I know somebody who works there, and these rumors get spread. But I think that you're right. I mean, most students don't have their teachers, and I say most only because my kids are in multi-age, so they just continue with the same teacher, and that is a challenge. And I think for many parents who've been sitting and waiting for answers, they're desperate to make decisions, whether that be absolute homeschooling or whatever. And without information, it's been really a real challenge. So I think giving that information, Katrina, like just besides just the schedule, but just giving as much information as possible so parents can work within it. Because right now it's difficult to make plans when you still don't really have answers of what the day is going to look like and how much requirement it's going to take on part of parents.
I think the hard part with that is definitely that we are given a schedule and we're given this format, but I do think that it comes back to that notion of what you're comfortable with, because I do think that this first quarter is going to look vastly different than any other quarter we've ever had. And I think that the piece that I'm talking about of like personalization even, or that you're speaking about, takes time to develop. Because at this point right now too, teachers know families based on how long they've worked at the school, but they don't know their families yet. In the same way that parents don't know their teachers. And that's where I think that open communication, I think you have to really be willing to do that all year long, or else we're going to be in the same rut.
So,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to chime in, which I know is a plug that is probably annoying parents who have been involved in this for a while, but I would encourage all parents to go to the website. And I noticed there's a little bit of a disconnect because we got a lot of questions out of the town halls, and people think all the answers to those questions are going to be only in this frequently asked question tab, but there are basically hundreds of pages of plans and things that we've developed that I haven't even gone through them all. There are a lot of pieces of information that are hidden in there. So if you have a high level of concern and want to dive into that, I encourage you to do so. The other thing I will say, just to speak directly to Jennifer's question, is the diving into the schedule and what it's going to look like for parents, and Brittany, what's going to look like for the parents is what's on the schedule. It's a work session. It's basically the only thing on the schedule. I encourage you to sign up for public comment or submit your questions in advance to the August 27th meeting. And I can provide one little piece of information about that I know about the high school schedule, which is that it is going to be possible for students to participate in, they can participate in 50% of it. So it's adjustable based on their needs, because the document is not necessarily, doesn't answer all questions. You can look at that, we can all look at that exact same document and come away with different things. Like, what is this going to look like? Does this mean my child logs on at, I think it starts at what, 8:30 and ends at 4:30? That's longer than the regular school day. Like, what's going on? And those are the type of questions that we're going to be asking at the August 27th meeting. But I can tell you that I know that in high school you can go 50% down. I'm sorry for my background noise. My kids are playing virtual Yahtzee with their grandma, and they're really excited.
I'm glad my dogs haven't barked. It's all good, Katrina. Hey, I want to get through some other questions real quick. Just related to something someone typed. There's right now a lot of kids who are at home with older siblings or neighbors or friends or other pods. To set those up, are we just kind of hoping and relying on ad hoc support networks, or are there any sort of centralized resources to help folks link up?
My only input before someone's going to chime in with more information I have is reach out to your PTO. I have been able to sit in some PTO meetings, and I know some schools, it's not cohesive among all schools, but some schools or PTOs are taking on the task of connecting families and providing resources, especially for those that want to include those that aren't in your immediate social network. Like if you want to form a pod of people outside of just your friends, that's one resource to check.
Okay, cool. Nobody else is jumping in and unmuting, so I want to go ahead and make sure we cover some other special challenges here. There's an exception in Albemarle County to virtual learning for, as far as I know, students with special needs and also English language learners. Can you all talk about how those situations are going to be handled?
Well, I just talked, but I imagine that one's primarily for me. My understanding of what that is going to look like. It is going to be offered for special education students who we are federally mandated to provide education that we cannot provide virtually. So we have to bring them into school. And for ESOL state students, the same deal, because of, and I think we're only getting those that are on the fourth grade or above who are scoring below a certain threshold, such that it would be ineffective for them to learn online if they don't have a grasp of the English language, and the majority of the material being presented is written in written form. I did ask, why aren't we doing it for our younger kids who are learning English? And the answer is a lot of the activities geared towards our younger kids can be accessed by those who are learning the language, because it's learning the alphabet, it's learning how to read. Still at stage 2, it's optional. We're not forcing students to go in, and we will provide virtual education if that's what they want. It's also optional for teachers. We are not making teachers come in to teach if they do not want to teach those students. For internet access students, that's the third group that gets it. It is those that, it's not financial reasons, because we will pay, we have formed a partnership and we will pay for internet access for those that can get it to their house. It is those that just, I've mentioned this earlier, that cannot get internet no matter what resources we provide them. And so those will be the ones in the school. We did get some very pointed and valid questions about what if this doesn't line up? Like, what if there aren't enough volunteers to cover all the students that fit into those categories that want to come to school? We have not run into that so far. And so with that, I'm going to say we don't have an answer for that so far. It hasn't come up yet.
Cool. And Katrina, this may yet be another one, but for you, but I'm not sure. We'll find out. How are things like counseling and emotional support and health screenings and meals, all those kind of things that schools provide in addition to learning, how are those being handled this year?
I would point to a wonderful article that I think, Brittany, you might have actually shared it on Facebook, about how a lot of the issues that we're feeling as a community are a representation of the fact that we rely on our schools to provide a lot more than education. They are pillars of the community that provide everything from nutrition to kids, mental health counseling to those who can't afford it. My other job is I'm an attorney for the Department of Social Services. It's a place where we provide support to kids that don't have support at home, who are being abused or neglected. And so we are struggling with how do we continue to fill all those roles when our primary objective on paper is just to provide education. So I'm sure other people will be able to speak in, because I'm sure like Mia, I'm sure the Boys and Girls Club is doing thinking around this. I will say that just in our guidance to the teachers, and Marian, perhaps you know this as well, we're saying that that is an important component of the virtual learning. Like the top paragraph of the plan is that we're focusing on the total development of the child, and I don't have the exact wording, but we're focusing on, for example, their mental health and social emotional learning and how they're developing as a person. This is not supposed to be, we are cramming math problems down on our children and making sure that they're prepped for a test. This is supporting them as best we can as a whole child.
Yeah, so I unmuted just to share that in terms of kind of some other services that, you know, a lot of families are reliant on schools to offer as well, like food. During normal times, and that's just kind of how I refer to pre-COVID, but during normal times, there is a federally funded food program called CACFP that allows organizations to, and my dogs are fighting behind me, so sorry. They're actually playing, it just sounds really weird. But that allows us to feed students outside of school time. The Boys and Girls Club is happy to do that, and that allows us to feed students in areas that have like 50% or more free or reduced lunch. And we do that, and that's how we provide a snack and supper after school. All of the school districts that we serve are pursuing that on their own right now to provide additional meals. So you can only pursue that grant if no one else in your area is pursuing it. So the Boys and Girls Club is not pursuing it in Albemarle or our other counties because the school districts are pursuing it with their own partners. So there's obviously efforts to continue to do meals. And you know, there's challenges with that as well, like who's home to pick up the meals and how's that gonna go. But CACFP is in addition to the school lunch program. So some of those big efforts that we saw at the start of quarantine, like you know, bulk meals to pick up and dinner meals and things like that are still being planned. It's kind of that line of extending grace and like how quickly does that happen. Those are federal food grants, and I know those applications weren't even due till this Monday. Like so many plans are still in the works, but I think that we will see in Albemarle some continued efforts to get meals in the hands of students on a very regular basis.
Yeah, I would chime in. I got so caught up in like this big picture thing that yes, on a very practical level, we right now are confirmed to continue offering food services to anyone who comes. We don't ask financial situation up to August 28th with, we're hopeful that we can extend it beyond that, but no matter whether we get the grant to continue offering food to everyone, we will still continue to offer food services to those who qualify for free or reduced lunch at those same costs. And then for mental health counselors, we need to do a budget update because obviously our budget has been affected and we don't have the same resources, but it's my understanding that we will be getting actually hopefully outside resources to help us hire additional mental health counselors. And hopefully that can be underway as soon as possible, but there are plans to expand our ability to offer mental health services to those who need it.
The parent who heard that meals will be distributed at bus stops, is that a legit or is that a rumor?
The most up-to-date information is going to be available on the website. I can, Nathan, I'm going to have a big old email to send you. I can send you the link. I just looked at it this morning. It's currently, I used to pick them up. I picked them up this summer. I picked them up at Woodbrook, so not at a bus stop. I picked it up at a school site. I think maybe in some communities we do it via bus stop.
Okay, we'll send those links around to everybody who's registered today. We are coming up toward the close of it all, but I wanted to give Barbara a chance to jump in here too. It's been a little bit since we heard from you about any other sort of support or counseling or emotional support or things that that are available that we might add to. And you're muted, Barbara.
There we go. I think probably just in the families that I've been working with over the past 3 weeks, their biggest concern is just communication. A lot of single moms who have, for example, one family I met with, single mom, 15-year-old child and a 5-year-old child. She works 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. She's worried about her 15-year-old son being responsible for her 5-year-old's education. I'm not certain he'll do it. So I think the more communication to all of the families that, with specific instructions on how to contact somebody for assistance is great. I know there are lots of mental health counseling efforts going on. We have the Partnership for Mental Health in the community, and they've been trying to ramp up and offer additional counseling, looking for additional opportunities for children and then teachers and parents, and the Women's Initiative as well. So I don't have a specific website or number outside of the Women's Initiative and Partnership for Mental Health. Both have websites that one could go to, but I do know that there are specific efforts being undertaken to make that free to parents and children that don't have health insurance. So Ready Kids is also another agency that provides mental health services for children.
Oh, Jinx, somebody just posted the same thing at the same time in the chat
Yes.
window.
And Region 10 has been really responsive about youth mental health and wellness as well. And they've continued to do virtual programming this entire time for this past 20 or so weeks, and have been a really good partner of ours. We're paying particular attention to wellness for our kids. One, because obviously they've been extremely isolated, and isolation has a really huge mental toll. But two, like, we just haven't seen them in a long time and we don't know what we're going to see. So, we're just trying to be prepared. We have a wellness coordinator, which is a behavior and mental health specialist on staff for Boys and Girls Club. But again, Region 10 has been really cooperative, and they've continued to do group sessions and individual counseling where they were in public schools before. And so there are a lot of students that they were serving that they don't see regularly anymore. And that was those students' main source of mental health intervention.
We're approaching an hour, but I've got one more question from a parent. What's being done to ensure teachers are supported in best practices for online learning, not just converting face-to-face lessons into an alternate format, such as lesson duration and time in front of the computer?
So at least on the teacher side, I will say that there's lots of professional development that's happening right now during our pre-service week to help us start to understand how we can provide virtual instruction that's high quality. In a lot of ways, I would say there's been a lot more collaboration between teachers that are specialists, like music teachers, art teachers, PE teachers, those courses that we feel are really essential, that because of virtual learning, sometimes it feels like it can be so hard to balance the two. And so there's been a lot of collaborative efforts on the teacher side and within the administrative side for us to collaborate and figure out how we can incorporate those things that are really important for kids in their well-being in everyday curriculum. I would also say that within that, we've been taking lots more time to reflect on what this means for us. There's been a lot more mental health that's been emphasized for teachers, more efforts for us to acknowledge that this will not be a normal year, but also to understand that within that there are resources that we have access to. But that is from the teacher side again.
Follow-up question from a parent. Is there anything parents can or should do to advocate for this kind of development or best practices training?
Since the advocacy usually falls to the school board, I can just tell you as a school board member what I find to be effective is people coming and speaking at public comment. We also, you can always email individual members and the board members, and we do read those, but we're getting a lot of them. And so if you want to have the most impact with your advocacy, that's what I would suggest you do. What I don't suggest you do is write an anonymous piece of hate mail and send it to my house, because that happened too. And I was like, trash.
Oh, that's rough stuff, man. All right, I want to close up with a round robin here, starting with Barbara. And everybody gets about a minute or less if you want. In a minute each, what should we do with our kids? So we started this whole thing off with. Barbara, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Thanks. I think I just don't know the answer other than we all need to continue to work together, public, private, nonprofit, to do the best we can to create a menu of options for parents.
Okay, that's concise. Mia, what should we do with our kids?
So answering the question as it's presented, I would say love them and prepare them for a lot of, and prepare them to be flexible. That's not always an inherent characteristic with children. And prime example for us, we welcomed our first set of staff back to reopen our Orange Club in Orange, Virginia today, based on the schedule that their school board approved, which is a hybrid model. And in the same day that I've been doing all these plans to welcome staff back, and we're going to serve these kids based on what the school district is doing. And Seville today came out with an article that Orange teachers are thinking about striking, and they're not. So I'm just like, best laid plans. There may be a day that the internet is out. There may be a day that, I have a 12-year-old that mom just isn't feeling it because the rest of the world is like really a lot. What can we do with our kids is just love them and teach them how to be flexible.
Thanks, Mia. Brittany, what should we do with our kids? What are we going to do? You're muted.
Yeah. Flexibility is important, but at the same time, I think just do establish expectations, do establish a schedule. I think kids need structure right now. There isn't, I don't know in your house, but there's not a lot in ours. And it's certainly helpful. I think kids like to know what to expect. They like to know what's next, and to have a visual reminder of that is helpful. But at the same time, obviously being flexible with that when things aren't going the way they are. I think it's helpful as parents to model adaptability and flexibility, because these are strange times. So, yeah.
All right, Katrina, Callsen, what should we do with our kids in a minute?
Put them on the iPad and ignore them. No, I'm joking. What I would say is be positive, and I say this to myself personally. It is easy to have anxiety. It's okay to have anxiety around this. I promise you that as a school board and as a division, we understand this is a difficult time for all of us, and we are committed to making it work. And I found myself in this pattern where I was thinking about virtual learning and thinking, how are my kids going to be able to do this? How is Bennett, my youngest, going to be able to do this? He can't do speech therapy online. He keeps putting his foot up in front of the thing. But then I logged him into this virtual chess class, and he will sit for 2 hours and learn chess. And I thought, I need to have an open mind about what this is going to look like. And I hope that all of you guys feel supported by the division, because that is absolutely 100% our goal. Whether or not we're able to fully accomplish it, just know that we're trying our best. And continue to, because it's hard in this time, continue to allow yourself to have some positive thinking around a situation that is not ideal, but I think in the end, we're going to come out all right.
Marian, you get the last word.
Okay, I would say advocate for your kids as you build partnership with them, as you hear their worries, their fears, the things that they're excited about too. Advocate with your voice and speak about those things, partner with their teachers and the people in their lives that are being the caregivers, because I think that's important. Show them you're in their corner. And more importantly, like, teach them how to grapple with hard emotions, because these are going to be hard emotions and it's going to be a roller coaster, and you are their biggest team member and fan, and they need you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time today. Thanks to all the parents who came out to hear from these folks and ask some really good questions. I appreciated the conversation, and I hope it was helpful to those of you who came. I want to thank our guests. Katrina Callsen is on the Albemarle County School Board representing the Rio District. Marian McCullough teaches at Mountain View Elementary School. Barbara Hutchinson is the Vice President of Community Impact at the United Way. Mia Woods is the COO at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Virginia, and Brittany Lichter is a former teacher and ad-hoc homeschool specialist this year. This is the first of several monthly talks that we're hosting here at Albemarle Dems. Each one will be on the third Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. Next month on September 16th at 7, our discussion is going to center around Black Lives Matter in Albemarle County. Then on Wednesday, October 21st at 7, we've got our hopefully next congressman, Dr. Cameron Webb, joining us to talk about racial disparities in healthcare and the need to get out the vote. So mark your calendar for both of those. If you miss it, check the Albemarle Democrats Facebook page. The events will be listed there, probably at the Albemarle Democrats website as well. We try and get things posted as soon as we can. Hey, don't forget to vote early this year. You can go ahead and request an absentee ballot today if you want to. Early in-person voting at the county registrar's office begins on September 18th. I got to put the plug in because it's a Democratic event, right? Anyway, find out more at elections.virginia.gov. And thank you all for coming out tonight. I really appreciate seeing everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks
Good
for having
night.
me. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Daisy.